There's a specific type of person who is genuinely interesting to talk to, clearly intelligent, clearly self-aware, and somehow still ends up with a social life that feels thinner than it should. Not because people don't like them. People always say they like them. It just never seems to go anywhere. Friendships stay at the surface. Conversations feel like they reset every time. And this person cannot figure out why because by every measure they can think of, they're doing everything right. The problem is the measure. Here's what nobody tells you about intelligence. It is extraordinarily useful for almost every problem a human being can face. Career problems, financial problems, technical problems, logic problems. And it is specifically, precisely, almost surgically bad at one thing: connection. Not because smart people don't want connection, they want it more than most, but because the skills that make you good at thinking are almost the opposite of the skills that make you good at relating. And once you understand the mechanism, you'll see it everywhere. In your own conversations, in the friendships that never quite got off the ground, in the ones that did, and why those were different. Let's start with what intelligence actually trains your brain to do. From a young age, if you were smart, you were rewarded for one specific behavior: getting things right. Right answers in class, right solutions at work, right analysis in arguments. Your brain got a decade of conditioning that says the goal of any mental activity is accuracy. Minimize error, evaluate before committing, check your work. That is an incredible operating system for most of life. And it is a disaster in social situations, because connection doesn't reward accuracy, it rewards presence. And presence requires doing something that a well-trained analytical brain finds genuinely uncomfortable. It requires committing to a moment before you've fully evaluated it. Think about what happens inside a smart person's head during a conversation. Someone says something, and instead of just reacting, the brain does what it was trained to do. It processes. Is this interesting enough to engage with? What's the most intelligent response here? Am I about to say something obvious? What do they actually mean by that? Meanwhile, the moment passed. The other person moved on, and the conversation has that slightly off-rhythm feeling where nothing quite lands. Not because the smart person said anything wrong, they barely said anything at all. They were too busy editing the draft to send the message. Psychologists call this overcognition, the tendency to process social situations with the same analytical machinery you'd use to solve a problem. And the cruel irony is that the smarter you are, the more sophisticated the internal editor becomes. Average overthinkers second-guess one response. Smart overthinkers build entire decision trees. They're running simulations of how the conversation might go, evaluating multiple conversational branches simultaneously, and selecting the optimal path, which sounds impressive, and produces the social energy of a loading screen. There's a researcher at the University of Michigan named Oscar Ibarra who spent years studying the relationship between intelligence and social behavior. His work found something that sounds like it should be obvious, but genuinely isn't. High cognitive ability is associated with increased social monitoring. Smart people don't just think more in general. They think more about thinking. They watch themselves think. And in a social context, that self-monitoring creates a layer of distance between the person and the conversation that the other person can feel without being able to name. It feels like talking to someone who is almost there. Present, but slightly behind glass. And here's where it connects to friendship specifically. Because friendship doesn't form in the moments when you said the right thing. It forms in the moments when you said the real thing, the unedited thing, the thing that came out before the internal editor got to it. Those are the moments people remember. Not because they were brilliant, because they were unguarded. And unguarded is the one mode a highly trained analytical brain resists most. Think about the people you actually feel close to, the friendships that formed fast and stuck. I'd bet most of them started with a moment where somebody said something slightly too honest, something a little unpolished, something that made you think, oh, this person is actually real. That moment isn't an accident. It's a specific psychological event. Researchers call it self-disclosure, but the more accurate description is a calculated lowering of the shield. And smart people are almost never the first to lower it, because lowering the shield feels like error. It feels like exposure. And a brain trained on accuracy doesn't voluntarily expose itself to being wrong. So what ends up happening is this. Smart people become brilliant at the parts of friendship that don't require vulnerability. They're great at interesting conversation about ideas. They're great at analyzing other people's problems. They're great at being reliably, consistently fine in social situations. And they become invisible in the moments that actually build closeness. The awkward admission, the thing they're not proud of, the fear they haven't quite solved yet. The parts of themselves that aren't optimized. Those parts stay in the edit bay. And the friendship stays at the surface. There's a name for what's missing. John Cacioppo, a neuroscientist at the University of Chicago who spent his career studying loneliness, found that the difference between people who build deep connections and people who don't almost never comes down to social skill in the traditional sense. It comes down to what he called perceived mutuality. The feeling that both people are equally in it, equally exposed, equally real. And you cannot manufacture that feeling through competence. You can only create it through reciprocal vulnerability. Two people taking turns being unguarded. And if one person is always polished, always measured, always the one asking the smart questions and giving the thoughtful analysis, the other person eventually feels alone in the conversation, even if they can't explain why. This is the trap smart people fall into without knowing it. They optimize for impressiveness and wonder why closeness never arrives. They bring their best self to every interaction and can't figure out why their best self keeps ending up alone at the surface level. The best self is not what people connect with. People connect with the actual self, the one that sometimes doesn't know the answer, the one that occasionally says the wrong thing and laughs about it, the one that admits, honestly, I have no idea what I'm doing here either. So here is the shift. And it is not complicated, but it is uncomfortable, which is probably why smart people resist it. Stop optimizing for the conversation. Start participating in it. Those are different things. Optimizing means monitoring, editing, selecting. Participating means reacting before the editor gets there. It means saying the half-formed thought instead of waiting until it's fully cooked. It means letting the conversation be a little messy because mess is where connection lives. Nobody ever walked away from a conversation thinking, wow, I really felt close to them because of how consistently well-structured their sentences were. Practically, this looks like three things. First, react before you respond. When someone says something that actually lands, let it land visibly. Don't immediately pivot to the intelligent follow-up question. Let the reaction happen in your face, in your voice, in whatever your body wants to do. That moment of unfiltered reaction is more connecting than anything you could say next. Second, volunteer the unresolved thing. Not the problem you've already figured out, the one you haven't, the thing you're still in the middle of. Smart people love sharing lessons they've already learned because it feels useful and safe. But lessons learned are finished. Unresolved things are alive, and alive things invite the other person in. Third, let the conversation be worse than you could make it. You have the ability to keep every exchange at a high level. Resist it occasionally. Say the obvious thing. Make the bad joke. Follow the tangent that goes nowhere. Perfection in conversation creates a performance, and you cannot connect with an audience. You can only connect with a person. That specific type of person I described at the start. The interesting one, the self-aware one, the one whose friendships somehow never go anywhere. I know that person pretty well. Because for a long time, every conversation I had was quietly a performance. I was there, fully present, completely engaged, and almost entirely hidden, saying interesting things about everything except the things that were actually true. And the relationships reflected it. Wide and shallow. Like a lake you can see across but can't swim in. The thing that changed it wasn't getting better at conversation, it was getting worse at it. Saying things before they were ready. Reacting before I'd decided how I felt. Being visibly uncertain in front of people instead of only showing them the conclusion. Turns out the conclusions were forgettable. The uncertainty was the part they connected with. Because uncertainty is human, and human is the only currency friendship actually accepts. Subscribe for more videos like this.